This is the lightning round. Tasty or addictive, a Chinese restaurant, by the way, in China, serving noodles laced with opium. Ooh, wow, bet they get a lot of seconds sold in that little restaurant. Hundreds of Colorado students are protesting a history curriculum that would apparently promote patriotism. You know, one of the things I hate are public schools. If you had private schools only, you'd be able to pick a school with a curriculum you liked. There is a girl who allegedly paid $20,000 to get a third boob so she'd become quote-unquote unattractive to men and perhaps even get a reality show. Well, it turns out the third boob is really just her. Her luggage was stolen, and on the list of contents in her luggage was a third boob prosthetic. It ain't true. Chelsea Clinton fears her baby could live on a planet without elephants. Oh my word, how will we survive? Elephants are here to stay, Chelsea. Relax, enjoy your millions, your kid will be fine. Washington, D.C. City Council has voted to allow the public to carry concealed handguns. They were kind of forced into this by the Constitution. They didn't particularly like it, and they're really making it so restrictive you almost can't conceal carry. But frankly, if people are allowed to, it'll save lives. It's a good thing. In Pennsylvania, a state senator came out of the closet to announce that he's gay. He did this while promoting hate crimes legislation. So, hate crimes legislation is perhaps the dumbest thing to ever come out of any legislative body in the world. If I beat you over the head, I'm guilty of beating you over the head. I can't be guilty of what I'm thinking. Doesn't make sense. Thought police. President Clinton talking about White House security. You remember we talked about this before, how somebody ran across the White House lawn and got in the front door. He doesn't know how that happened. I don't know how it happened either, but it ought not happen again. I'm sure heads will roll. The story of the week is ISIS and airstrikes. We're going to have to go into a little bit of detail on this one because it seems just a bit confusing. So let me start from scratch. In Syria, Bashar al-Assad is a dictator and an evil dictator. And the United States government, in fact, the president himself, has pushed to get rid of Bashar al-Assad. He is experiencing a civil war. He has two enemies. He has the Free Syrian Army and he has ISIS. Both of them are attacking him. Both of them are trying to crush him. We have decided to go after ISIS too. So we are now attacking the enemy of our enemy. We're making it easier for Bashar al-Assad to stay in power because one of the most powerful forces against him, ISIS, is now being attacked by the United States Air Force. In fact, it looks as though Bashar al-Assad's Air Force and our Air Force are one and the same. In fact, they are one and the same. So what we've done here is we have decided to declare war on a group of people in a sovereign nation without getting permission from that nation to go invade. We've done it without a declaration of war. We don't know if our legislators were in favor of going into Syria or they weren't, so we don't know who to pat on the back if it goes well or to who vote out of office if it doesn't. Nobody is really being held accountable here. What this is sure to do is incite radical Islamists inside the United States so that they can establish themselves as part of ISIS. They'll attack us here. They'll put bombs on bridges or fly airplanes into buildings or whatever evil deed that comes to their minds. I suspect by not going to war against a country that's actually attacking us, we are going to bring a lot of death to the United States. We need to get Congress to declare war, and we need to wait until we're attacked or we know we're being attacked by that enemy. This segment of the program is called If They Were Here, and if they were here, or if he were here, it would be Mitt Romney. It appears that Mitt Romney's team hasn't really disbanded. They're busy watching what's going on in the Republican side of the House and the Senate and all the other candidates out there, and they're trying to find out who's going to run because they're actually thinking that maybe, just possibly, Mitt Romney might win if he runs a third time. What Mitt Romney should do is run home. Mitt Romney was a terrible candidate. He was stiff, he was boring, he was unexciting, he was just blah. And the truth of the matter is, I was never sure if he was Democrat or Republican. I mean, he just was all over the place politically. Didn't make a lot of sense, some of the arguments that he made. Tried to argue against Obamacare when Romney Care, the plan that he designed for Massachusetts, was the model for Obamacare. He believed in socialized big government, but he didn't. And then he was radically Republican or something along those lines. Totally uninspiring candidate, two-time loser. The Republicans can do better than that. I don't know if there's a dark horse somewhere, but you know, they've got candidates like Rand Paul, who I think would make a terrific president. They ought to just quit replaying the loser. They ought to quit putting up candidates who have no chance of winning. They ought to come up with somebody who believes in the Constitution, who's going to fight for limited government, and who has principles. And that last one is the most important one, principles. Somebody who will stand on their principles, not compromise every time you turn around, not make you wonder which side of the fence they stand on, or if they're simply straddling it again. Republicans can do better than Mitt Romney, and they should. And Mitt, if you were here, I would tell you to stay home. This section of the program is called Obamamania. Apparently, climate change is a growing and urgent threat, according to Obama and his entire administration. And not just a threat to the United States, but a threat to the whole world. Funny, I don't see it that way. Temperatures apparently have been flat for 17 and a half years. In fact, we're on the cusp of our 18th year without temperatures actually getting warmer on the planet. The Antarctic has got some of the thickest sea ice it's had in decades, and more of it, covering more ground. You know, at first they said it was global warming, and then when it didn't look too much like warming, they went around and said, well, it's global climatic change. And now that the temperatures have been flat, they're kind of stuck. And they said, in fact, they said that there was no flat. These temperatures are continuing to escalate. They were going up. This is not happening. And then they proceeded to come up with over 60 excuses for why the temperatures weren't going up. You may have heard some of them. You know, the deep water in the ocean was sucking up the heat. It all of a sudden decided it was going to make things cooler. Why it wouldn't have been doing that in the 1990s, I don't know, but apparently by the time 2010 hit, it was sucking up heat. They said it was El Nino and La Nina, or El Coldo and El Warmo, or whatever they mean by it. It was just the temperature and the currents in the ocean in the Pacific. And none of that seemed to hold water either. They just keep coming up with excuse after excuse for why the temperatures are flat, and at the same time telling us why last year was the warmest year on record. Clearly, this is not the settled science the administration would like you to believe, and I don't think the great apocalypse is going to happen anytime soon. Polar bears are doing just fine up in the great north. We're having seasonal changes. We've had global climatic change since day one. I remind you, the Great Lakes, they were once carved out by glaciers. Relax. Even if they managed to do all of the things about cutting down on CO2 that they said they wanted to, it wouldn't even reduce the temperatures by a fraction of a degree. It's such a tiny little difference, it wouldn't make any difference at all. No. Global warming is not a threat, Mr. President. Maybe the economy, maybe jobs, maybe national security. Hey, how about immigration? Forget about the global warming. We'll be fine. This segment of the program is It Sucks to Suck, and the government is sucking the money right out of your wallet, right out of your bank account. They're going to spend $3.33 million to improve the quality of media content in Armenia. You know, it's easy to waste money like this when you can just take it at gunpoint, and essentially that's what they do. If you don't pay your tax bill, if you tell the IRS, you know, I'm not going to give you 40% of my income, they eventually come after you with guns drawn. If they had to earn the money, if they had to ask you for the money, if they had to say, Joe Public, will you give us $3.33 million of your dollars so we can teach the media how to react in Armenia, you'd probably say no, and they'd probably forego the project. But they get to use government force, and they get to waste your money. Now, this is only a tiny fraction If you could add up all of the government waste programs like the one we're talking about now, it would be a tiny fraction of the budget. Most of the money the federal government gets, it spends on the military, it spends on social programs like Medicare and Medicaid, and it spends on things like Social Security. All three of them should be cut. In fact, two of them should be privatized. But they're not going to do that soon. And we've got a $17.5 trillion debt while they're wasting your tax dollars. Eventually, the country will go bankrupt. And eventually, they'll stop wasting your money. But that's what it's going to take. Unless, of course, we start electing constitutionalists, not Democrats, not Republicans, not libertarians, constitutionalists. That's the law of the land. That's where the doctrine of enumerated powers is. That's where the limited spending is. If anybody is to blame for the government's waste besides the government itself, it's you and me, because we're the ones who are putting in office the politicians who are putting forth these spending bills. Let's wake up and stop it.